Good morning. I'll say it again. The sun has come up this morning, and God is still God. We are all loved by God, and we're all called to love each other from a distance, that is, at this time. I want to bring your attention to loving your neighbor for a moment. I want you to consider writing to your friends that are in care centers. I made a few phone calls yesterday, and every care center that I spoke with said that they're accepting letters at this time. So you can send letters by mail, or you can drop them off at the home of Nancy Daly at Preston, or at Diane Bickness in Wyckoff. Just if you're going that route, put the receiving person's name on the letter or card, and I'll make sure that it gets where it needs to go. Hopefully, we can have those by this weekend or by the end of this weekend. Second, this is exciting. Church is back on this weekend. On the air, that is. Tune in to 103.1 KFIL, 9:30 this Sunday morning for scripture, encouraging message, maybe even some music and more. Looking forward to this new ministry, and I'll be posting a recording on YouTube as well. So for today's devotion, I thought I would like to talk about time apart. Being that many are staying home at this time, and if you're a people person, it might be your absolute worst nightmare. At the same time, there are benefits that come from isolation as well. Some of the greats in Scripture, Moses, Elijah, Jesus, and Paul, all took time alone where they grew and they did their best ministry after their time apart. This also includes Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., and Gandhi in our own time. Moses spent many years apart in the land of Midian. Elijah heard God in a still small voice after running from King Ahab. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert, and Paul spent several days with the disciples before heading out to preach the gospel. So time apart can be a good thing. It's a time where we can focus on God and develop compassion away from some of the noise and the negativity of everyday life. A time where we can experience Sabbath time with God. Sabbath time doesn't necessarily need to be a day of the week. Sabbath, rather, is a practice. Sabbath is a sacred time of growing in love for God and each other. And I want to read this scripture here from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 11 through 13. And in this scripture, Elijah has run away to escape the rage of King Ahab and Jezebel. And this is what happens to Elijah. The Lord said, "Go and stand at the mountain of the Lord. The Lord is passing by." A very strong wind tore through the mountains and broke apart the stones before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. After the fire, there was a quiet sound. Thin, quiet. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his coat. He went out and stood at the cave's entrance. A voice came to him and said, "Why are you here, Elijah?" Can finish reading that story in 1 Kings chapter 19. But I want to move on and say that amid Elijah's fear, there was the wind, the earthquake, the fire. But God was not in those things. God was in a sound. The NIV translates this as a still, small voice. This is where God was. And God speaks to us in a still, small voice today if we're listening. I want to encourage you to spend this time not as if you're being locked in, but as if you're being called to a sacred time to God, to pray, to meditate, to read scripture. Maybe pick up a good novel that calls for compassion or forces you to see a part of the world or a group of people in a different way. Reflect on God's love and develop compassion in this time apart. I want to shout out to all the people that are still working today, grocery store workers, healthcare workers, law enforcement, all of these people that I'm sure I'm missing some, all of these people that are keeping society moving at this point, and pray for their wellness as well. Now, before I leave you, I want to leave you with this poem. It's by Lynn Unger, and it talks about this time, and this time as being a Sabbath time. So here's her poem. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling, give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you would commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with all your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. And until we see each other again, blessings, stay well, keep the faith, and may you be at peace. See you next time.